everyone is aware. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brendan Costello. I serve as the director of the Combine. If you're not familiar, the Combine is a AgTech incubator housed on Nebraska Innovation Campus. We're a part of Invest Nebraska, which is the state's venture development organization. This is the first webinar series that we're hosting around this a topic of robotics in agriculture. I just wanted to share a little bit about kind of why we were doing this, and then I'll turn it over to our featured speaker today. Um, Robotics is a growing area in agriculture, and we really hope that Nebraska can be a place that becomes a central location for where those robotics can be built at. Nebraska, we definitely see as a place of builders, and if we're gonna have technology being built for agriculture. We want to do it here in Nebraska. And we've got a lot of companies that we think are coming out right now who are focused on what do robotics and sensors look like in agriculture. And so this is the first of a monthly series that we hope to do featuring founders and enterprises that are specifically focused on a robotics effort in agriculture. So some of the topics today that we've been kind of focusing on is the story of the business, but also a little bit about some of the robotic building challenges and solutions that they found as they have built. And so the goal for this ag robotics series specifically is to focus a little bit more on some of the unique pieces of building robotics in agriculture and some of the engineering challenges that entails. So how today will go is in a moment I'll introduce Chafik. He'll talk a little bit about kind of the history and the vision for his company Marble. Then Chafik and I have a few questions that will be a little bit of a moderated discussion, and then after that we'll open it up to questions from everyone. If you have a question as we're going along or during that open time, feel free to drop that in the chat, and Chafik will get to as many as we can within the hour. So. Chafik, any questions before we get started, or anybody else? All right. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Chafik Barbar. He is the CEO and co-founder of Marble Technologies. Marble Technologies, I'll let him do the full introduction, but it is a robotics and automations company focusing in the beef packing industry currently. They are also have an office here on Nebraska Innovation Campus. And have been previously a member of the Combine. We're really excited to welcome Chafik today. So Chafik, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Brennan. Hey, everybody. My name is Chafik Barbar. Glad to be here. Brennan, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure since I'm the first guest speaker. I suppose I have to do a half decent job for you to do the next one. So hold me accountable to that. I guess I'll start by just maybe telling a little bit who I am and kind of my personal story, and then kind of pivot to kind of what led me to starting Marble. That's helpful, and I'll try and answer as many questions as we can as we go along here. And if anything comes up, please feel free. I enjoy more conversations than presenting, so jump in at any moment here. So again, Chafik Barbar, CEO, Marble Technologies. A little bit on the personal side, I am originally from Syria. Came to Lincoln, Nebraska when I was 14 years old. So a very, very different place than where I grew up. You could have sent me to the moon and said, "Welcome to Nebraska," and I would have believed you. And but since then, it's been home for me and my family. I came here in '98, like I said, when I was 14 years old, and I've had a short stint in Boston. Lived in Boston for about 4 or 5 years, but outside of that, I went to high school in Lincoln, and then I did my undergrad at the University of Nebraska. And I started a company prior to Marble and in Omaha, and grew that company and exited it. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it in just a minute. And then today I live in Omaha. I've got 3 little kids. I have a 10, 8, and 7-year-old. So we're pretty busy, play all kinds of sports and activities. And then I try and build a company in between. I guess a little bit on the previous company, which probably would probably help kind of connect to the dots to how I got to Marble. The previous company that I built is called Graham Bridge. So I started my career as a software developer. I work for those of you that are from the Lincoln area. I work for Fiserv here in town, and I was a software developer there. They do banking software, and I was on that team. So I learned, I guess, I learned the software trade, if you will, by working for Fiserv. I worked there as a developer for a couple of years, and then I always had an itch to start something on my own. I've always, done side hustles, built websites. This is kind of back, around kind of, 99 2000, when building websites was it's actually, you can make a career out of that. But I did that on the side, and then worked for Fiserv, and then um, I met a couple guys who they did financial risk management for farmers, and they had an idea to build a platform to do financial risk management for farmers. They used Excel sheets to go out to farms and help manage inputs, and help manage basically everything that's coming, financially, that's coming in and out of that farm on an Excel sheet. And they had an idea to build it out of a build a platform for it. So that's when I came into the picture, and we came together and we built a company called Grand Bridge, and we it was a software platform, SaaS model. Uh, we did not go directly to farmers. We sold agribusinesses, so the Farm Credit Network, input suppliers, crop insurance. We called on these groups to take our platform, and that was our distribution channel. It was a great run for us. I guess through that journey, that what kind of went over probably 7 8 years. I learned a lot. People ask me, how much of what you do today at Marble comes from, what you've done previously in your previous company versus what they taught you in business school. And I would say probably still 70 80% of what I do today probably comes from probably building a company once before. And probably 20 30% is kind of what the book version of starting companies. It's funny. I think what they give you in school is, they like, it's still, a lot of decisions you make today are still a lot of intuition, a lot of, I don't know what you want to call it, gut decisions, wisdom, different terminologies. But it's, I think, the book version of this, I think, gives you a checklist. It's more like, before you make that gut decision, make sure you thought about those four things. So which is helpful. But so yeah, I learned how to build a team. I learned how to the cycle of building a product, going from an idea, that customer discovery, that journey, the proximity, how critical it is to be close to your customers. I think when to spend money and when not to spend money. That's a big thing that you learn. Build, and again, like that intuition for it. When to panic and when not to panic. Also, I think that's something you learn by when short of you building it. It's hard to learn. That's really. But I think what's most critical that I did in the first company is I I built a network. I built a team, and I think that's where a lot of times, I meet people and they say, like, like, what's like, we do a very good job, recruiting people and bringing them here. And they say, like, how do you find a co-founder? How do you recruit people? And I think I wish, like, part of me just wants to give people an answer, because I believe that is probably the most critical thing, because that's what a company is. It's money and it's people, and that's all it is. And the money, there's a lot of tricks to finding money. The people is where it gets really tough, and I think that's what I did in the first company. I built a great team there. I built a team that complements what I do, and that's, again, like, another thing you learn by building a company is, like, you get to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I think you start surrounding yourself, at least if you have that self-awareness, you start surrounding yourself by the people who complement you, and you get to know each other, and you get to really build something together, and carry that relationship forward. Building these companies, it gets very, very hard before it gets easy. and sometimes the movies make it look like it's all glamorous. And for those of you who have been part of this and built companies, I mean, you know exactly what we're talking about here. It's hard. It's very, very hard. So you got to find the people who will not crack when it gets really hard, and that's really what you build. And that's not something you do in an interview. You know, your co-founders, your first 10 hires. These are people that it's, just like how, people find spouses and, the relationships that really matter in life. And that's really what, that was the biggest thing in building the previous company. And that's I would say is also what, you also internalize that, if you can, as you go out and look for problems, if you can understand the problem really good, if you can build a team around it, the solution is just a byproduct of you getting these first two right. Problem, team, solution, I think becomes an execution game. So that kind of brings me, I built Grambridge. It was a great exit for us. We ended up being acquired by Cargill, by ADM. Came in and acquired us, and then Cargill came in as a joint venture on it. And at that time, I went out to Boston. I did grad school there for a couple of years. And I stayed in touch with the people who stayed at Graham Bridge, and we, it's I think I knew I had another company in me. I wanted to take a little break. I wanted to kind of look for, where do I go next in my career. At that point, I was married. I had three kids, so I whatever I was going to work on next, it had to be something that I wanted to be something that is big. I wanted to work on something big, and I think the people that I when I left Grambridge, they knew I wanted to start something else. But that was my only condition. I'm looking for impact. I want to, because that's what translates into, making a difference. That's what translates into financial reward. Like I was going to look for a big problem. And then, I graduated around COVID time in middle of 2020. Um, all the stuff that, kind of COVID just put a big magnifier on a lot of things, including the food supply chain. And I think I stayed in touch with a couple of people from Grambridge who had a lot of good relationships to the animal protein industry, both on the production side, but also on the processing side. And we kind of started seeing the signs. It became very obvious very quick that the meat processing part of the meat supply chain, the processing part, is by far the weakest link in the meat supply chain, arguably probably in our entire food supply chain. And the reason for that is that heavy reliance on labor. 80% of that labor that goes into producing animal protein is concentrated within that 24-hour period of when just to process that animal. And that became our thesis really for a company. At the time, the industry was hurting pretty bad. Labor shortages. They were making a lot of margin. So you're always kind of like look at, as the industry, do they have margins if I can go solve these problems? And also looked at the technology, is the technology good enough if we were to go take a look at, how do you bring, next generation automation, robotics? Could you build it, could you take it out of a lab and put it in a place like a meat processing plant? And how do you make an impact with that? So that was, and the timing, it's always like you can control a lot of things when you're building a company. The timing piece again, kind of goes back to that intuition. Like, does it feel right or does it not? Sometimes you're too early, sometimes you're too late for different reasons. And the timing, we had a thesis for timing then, and that's what we went to work on. We, we, I knew how hard it is to build software. I also knew how hard it is to build. People tell us to stay away from hardware, and we knew that if we wanted to jump into this, we really had to build the full stack. And recognizing how expensive it is to prototype and do hardware, I wanted this company to be very, very focused on the customer, on the problem. Like there is no margin for, missing the market fit. Like, you only get one shot with hardware, especially big industrial hardware. You only get one shot with it. And that's really, that's we focus the company so much on, I tell people, like, even to this day, when we build products, like we crowdsource the solution. It's, when we sit down and design these systems, like we're designing them, and we got the customer at the table, really, like, giving us feedback on it. It takes a lot of guts early on, especially, to go out to, I'm not from the industry, so I recognize that pretty early on. So we got pretty close with one of the meat processors in Omaha called Greater Omaha. We brought the leadership, the owner of that facility, onto our board early on, because you needed somebody to tell you what the problem is, and you always need someone in your job to have this illusion that, like how difficult could this be to find a problem I can, and that insight is pretty hard. So so you got to recognize that. So we walked in again with a thesis, not a solution, and I think that's how I believe companies should be built. You just have to isolate yourself from any solution. For as late as really going through plans, asking a lot of questions, and they led us to our first product that we ended up building, and we've commercialized as that first product that we've taken to market, which is called Pack Off. And I'll show here a couple of videos in just a minute to help some give some more context. But I guess all that to say is, I think today when you talk to people and say how, the traction that Marble has out there, I think it's a result of us being, very in tune with our customers, very in tune with the world. And I think, like any technology that we've built, that maybe others have attempted to build and have not succeeded in building, I think it's because, I think if you ask our customers, they would say, Marble, they ground their technology in the reality of how our facilities work. And I think that's a credit to our team, that we're very much in tune with the real world. Even though we play at the edge of technology, we're able to ground it into how how these facilities that we work operate. So that's a little bit kind of on the journey. The first product, not knowing you walk into a meat facility, and maybe this is, Brennan, if it's possible for me just to play a quick video. And for those of you, maybe you guys have been inside of a meat processing plant, maybe you haven't. So I figure I'd just kind of give you some. Is this my screen or your screen, Brennan?
Yeah, that's your screen.
That's my screen. Okay,
Yeah, looks like you got the videos. Yep, right there.
okay, perfect. Okay. Um, just to give you a little sense, are you guys able to see this video?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And I'll just let loop a couple times. But like, if you walk into a meat processing plant, what a meat processing plant does is, you're starting with a side of beef, or like whatever your input is, and it's got to get broken down into 30, 40 pieces, cuts, and that's basically today it's reverse manufacturing. It's like it's a de-assembly line. I think there's, and I don't know if it's true or not, but like somebody said, like either the meat industry was inspired by the Model T, or the Model T was inspired by the meat industry. But it's basically it's a workflow. You've got 400 or 500 people kind of shoulder to shoulder with knives in their hands, and basically they're de-assembling that process. So they break it down into 30, 40 pieces. They vacuum seal it. They sort it. This is what you're seeing, the sortation process. And you're still seeing, what comes out of these facilities is really still like very, very large, pieces of meat. That's going to go to more facilities to further, be further processed. But, not knowing what to, it's like, where do you start with something like this? This is just, it's a lot of stuff, and, part of me just like, yeah, great. Let's just go take these knives and put them on robots. And that's where the industry said, like, don't do this. Here's a good place to land this company. And they kind of, told us to go work on what they call the pack, which is their packaging department. Basically starting with this stage here, you've got at any given meat facility, you've got probably close to 100 people. All they're doing is they're putting meat in bags like what you're seeing here, and they're vacuum sealing it, and then they're sending it to downstream, and you'll have 40, 50 people. Their whole job all day long is to identify visually. You get assigned, Brennan, you look for brisket. Chafik, you look for strip one. When you see one, grab it, put it into a box. And that felt like a low-hanging fruit for us to go automate. And what you're seeing here in this video is how the entire beef and pork industry operates, and that's what we went to work on. So we basically went and automated that entire process. We, as you can imagine, we We built a platform. What you're seeing here, everything you're seeing on the screen is what Marble builds and delivers to our customers. So we deliver a turnkey solution. We automate an entire process for an entire department. The hardware, the software, the AI, all that stuff, we gets built in-house. And that's what we take to our customers, a turnkey solution that doesn't just only solve the uh, efficiency challenge that they have. How do you reduce labor against any type of automation, like any value proposition and any type of automation, whether it's this or somebody or something else? Like you have to look for a multifaceted payback, return on investment for these customers. It can't just be the one-to-one. Gets very tough economically to say, okay, I'm going to remove 20 people. I'm going to, cut your labor down by 50%, and that's going to pay for this technology. Like this technology is expensive. You have to look for more value proposition, whether it's the product safety, whether it's yield. Yield is very, very, very big by proposition, and especially in this industry. This is a cost cutting automation to like this money making opportunity, and that's where really these conversations get a lot of fun. But that's what Marble commercialized in 2024. We installed our first commercial system at Greater Omaha. And then since then, we've gone out to Central Valley in California. We've installed several systems there. Last year, we completed one at Creekstone Farms in Kansas. So today, Marble sourced over 3% of the U.S. beef production day to day. And in 2025, the company became cash flow positive, which is a really, really big milestone from us. From, when really this journey, you're talking 2021, we started developing. 23 we piloted, 2024 first commercial system, 2025 is profitable. That's a really big deal, and that was critical to me, to send that signal back to the world, to the investors, to the customers, that this is a sustainable company, this is a sustainable business model. Kind of where we're going. That was, Packoff was a great place to land the company. Now we're getting braver and braver, and I've always known, it's if you want to make a ding in the animal protein processing industry, you have to go on the cutting lines. You have to go upstream in the process. That's where you have 700-800 people. All they're doing is cutting meat. That's where all the yield is decided. Like, if you wanna build next generation process, you have to go on what they call fabrication, which is the cutting and trimming, and that's what Marble is working on next. So our next product is that entire workflow. So we're going to have an end-to-end platform that is a fabrication workflow, and that's also a packaging workflow. So in this future state, when somebody is deploying the Marble platform, Marble will be 90% of that infrastructure. We will be doing all the cutting, and we will be doing all the packaging for our customers. The way we're going to enable that technology, sometimes people say, "Oh, like what does that look like?" It's very hard and complicated to cut meat, and that is very true. We've kind of gone back to the drawing board and kind of gone through the exercise of like, okay, like here's the input, the cattle, here's the output. With today's technology, with this product mix, that we have, how would you cut? How is this the right sequence of cutting? And go through that exercise from a process engineering standpoint. And then again, with today's technology, where would you introduce automation and robotics? Like, how would you lay out this whole workflow to enable, the technology that is available to us today, but just as critical, how do I set this up for generation 2, 3, 4 of robotics? So as robotics get better with dexterity, as robotics get better with machine learning, how do I set that up so I can bring that technology in and layer it in the future, and so I'm not having to rip all this stuff out again? And that's really what we've gone to work on, today. So we're developing all this technology. What's the core technology that's enabling all this is really a mix of imaging technology. So all these systems today, we use a lot of cameras, a lot of RGB, a lot of depth cameras. On the fabrication side, we're moving to X-ray and CT scanning. So like what you see at a hospital. So it's all one thing that's gotten in the way of automation for something like this is, your ability to understand, that lean to bone to fat structure and be able to see what's beneath the surface to enable some of the robotics. And that's what we're introducing. So what that imaging technology is going to enable us to do is it's also going to enable us to understand the structure of that input, that cattle, and decide what should we produce. If you're trying to maximize profitability, if you're trying to optimize it for your orders. Today it's a very first in first out flow, and now you're basically brought a level of visibility that's going to allow you to understand how do I optimize this animal, and then use that same imaging technology to enable automated saws, automated robotics. Early on, we're not, with this new platform, we're going to go probably from having 800 operators to probably potentially 50% labor efficiency there. But also that yield, we're going to be able to capture pretty significant yield that is being left on the table today in pure pounds, but also in being able to produce more of the more profitable muscles and create more margin, a margin uplift for our customers. So very, very huge value proposition for our customers. We're in the process of piloting some of this technology, and we got letters of intent in place, and we're going to start probably deploying some of these systems as early as late 2027 to our customers. I talked for probably a whole lot here. I'll probably just take a pause a little bit and see where Brennan wants to take it next.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Shafik. That was a really, really good overview and really exciting kind of where the company is going. It's exciting to give robots knives into that level of production. So I've just got some questions. Again, if anybody has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll just start going through questions with the time that we have. But first, I just wanted to kind of talk through a few of what you have found for unique challenges of building in ag generally, but I think you're also in one of the most interesting environments of within a packing plant. Just generally, like what have you faced in terms of challenges of building automated systems or robotics within the environment that you work in? Like what challenges have you had to overcome? What was surprising that you had to learn about, deploying systems in those environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple different areas. I think what makes meat processing. I mean, you look at like automation in warehouses. Warehouses is a fairly structured process. You look at what's happening in a workflow and a meat and meat processing. It's got some structure. It's very unstructured. When things are going good, there's structure. When things, there's the non-happy path. When things kind of go, things become unstructured. So you're dealing with an unstructured process, and the product in of itself is, you're talking with, it's meat, so it's biological products, and it's not structured products either. So it's an unstructured product, an unstructured process, and that's what you're really having to build for. And that's probably, sometimes people look at our application and say, "Oh, you guys found a real application for AI." Which I think I take that as a compliment. I think a lot of people are trying to kind of inject AI and stuff that doesn't need AI, and I think in this case it happens that the AI is kind of made for some of these variabilities that you're dealing with, process wise and product. So that's I think the so there's that you have to solve for, is like, how do I, if you want to talk like specifically on how do you train models to be able to like our sortation systems are based on a machine learning model that we build that has to really call these products, within 99.99 accuracy, because that's where the product is going to go. So you call it wrong, it's going to go in the wrong box, type of thing. So that's, how do you build machine learning models that can, accommodate the different breeds of cattle, the different seasons, the different regions, all that stuff. It just, that data collection was pretty significant early on. Later on, it becomes your moat. To acquire it is not. It's a lift. Just take. Being able to just go mount data collection systems. You have to control lighting. You have to. I think that like everybody like this technology is new. It's again, we were at it. Like even what's available today versus what was available in like 2022 when we were building all this technology is day and night difference. So it's all finicky. It all kind of barely works. and you're kind of fighting a lot of those things early on, trying to make it work. So there's that challenge of the technology that you have to overcome to make it work. What also turned out to be just as challenging as, again, like, how do you ground this tech? Like, what are the constraints of these facilities? What are the space constraints that you have to work with? What are the, like, sanitary requirements, the wash down requirements? You have to build so much redundancy into the process because, like, everybody, like, we're going to get measured on downtime. The customer is being measured on downtime. So, like, they will not touch this technology unless you are able to speak to these aspects. It's kind of interesting how their purchasing decisions are on this technology. I think there's this notion that the meat industry is, like, not open to technology. Trying not. They're actually, you'd be surprised how much they've tried. Like, they are very, very willing to try new things. But I think, again, it just, the requirements, their constraints are pretty tough. And, it's the whole process they work with. It's a continuous process. So, like, the idea of slowing them down. So it's a very binary decision when they look at technology, like, will this work? And then when we go clean it tonight, will it turn on tomorrow morning? And, like, it's as simple as that, and it's as hard as that. And I think you have to design for those constraints. And I think that's where, like, involving your customers so early on in the process, like, you have to really truly internalize these constraints and, like, understand them, because, like, I think everybody can design for a happy path technology. The 800 ways that this can go wrong, I think, is, like, what stands between you and just enough downtime that they're not willing to scale this technology. And I think that's where we've succeeded. I think early on, between the people I brought on from the industry who have seen all the things that haven't worked, so they avoided it in our products, but also just doing it with the customer hand in hand. Keep in mind, it's
Mm.
hard to, like, test all this stuff. We can't build all this on Nebraska Innovation Campus. You can't bring enough meat here, or you can't simulate what happens in a meat processing plant. Just the moisture, all that stuff, that is so hard. So, like, you need to get into the field as soon as possible to try this stuff out. And I think that's where we probably, that's where the challenge was, and that's I think where we also won.
Yeah. You talk a little bit about as you're going through it, but just what I always assume is biological variability is one of the big challenges, right? You're not building the Tesla that's coming off the line that everything's the exact same. What has kind of been your process for solving for that? And has it mostly been building enough data to do this, or are you starting to use AI tools to that represent? You talked a little about kind of the next generation of where this is going. I'm just curious of the thought process of how do you overcome some of the biological differences, challenges, and where you kind of seeing that going in terms of technology use?
Yeah. That's the ultimate challenge. I think, like, AI is the right hammer for this problem in so many ways, but, like, it all hinges on data. The way you collect data is by getting in the field as fast as possible through pilots, through, just there's so much, of this technology you can build in a lab, in a simulation, and we do a ton of that stuff, especially as we're starting to get into, like, really, really complex stuff. Like, how do you get robotics to, like, cut, soft tissue? Like, now you're talking about pretty sophisticated level of machine learning that, like, needs to, continuously, like, take a picture, watch how it deformed, and, like, come up with a new motion plan to, like, cut meat in real time. Like, you're talking about, as hard of a problem as they come. Um, and there's just not enough data that exists on the internet. It's not like, you're building this LLM that you can just go, scour the internet. So the philosophy here, Brandon, is, like, go get in the field as soon as you can, and collect data. Work with your customers, work with your partners. Like, the only way you can do this is by just having as many partners, as many people who understand this industry inside out, who are willing to let you in on that environment, for both, like, so you can understand the constraints, but also you can collect data. But there is just that we found that to be the fastest way to learning, and overcoming that biological challenge and the environmental challenges, by trying to field these robotics as soon as possible, into pilots, into proof of concepts. and just use them as, I guess, as data collection units, for lack of a better term, in so many ways.
One of the things I've been learning a little bit about in terms of this kind of training AI models is the use of synthetic data. Has that been a possibility, or what do you kind of think about that in terms of agriculture robotics?
Yeah. Yeah, we've played with it a little bit. It's first of all, it's not easy. It's finicky, I think, and probably it's got its applications, but like for what we try to, like, have synthetic, briskets and all that stuff, it starts to become a little bit laughable. Maybe there's people who are better at it, at generating synthetic data than us. But I think I know they use it even like in surgery or robotics and all that stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, it'll take you a little bit far. But man, it just, and then you go into the field, you're like, oh, this is very different. So I think it's a good place, and we do a lot of like sim to real type of application. Like, you start out with a simulation as much as you can, synthetic data. Now we're fortunate enough that we sit probably, I would say we sit probably on the largest data sets probably of I don't know anybody who has as much data as we do, which is kind of interesting. When you start your company, like the lack of data is like your problem. And then, like, oh, almost overnight, once somebody, lets you in to collect data, like now you got so much data, like now managing that data becomes the constraints. Like, I've never dealt with this much data. How do I store it? How do I pay for all of it? Which of it I need? How do I use it to train? But it's not much on the synthetic side. No, we haven't had much success there.
You talked a little bit in what you were talking about in kind of the phase two, which is the, for lack of a better term, the cutting of the meat right before it would go into your
Mm.
pack off, and building that so that you're using today's technology, but building it for the next generation of robotics. Can you talk a little bit about, okay, what is your vision, or what are you seeing for the next generation of robotics, how it's going to affect what you do, how it's going to
Mm.
affect kind of your environment, and what you see as kind of where it's going?
Yeah, so I kind of the best analogy when I think about kind of where we're going next is like, I think about like autonomous driving. There's like level one autonomy, level two, level three autonomy, and I kind of think about it kind of in the same vein here a little bit. I think it's you know it, the luxury I think we have here that we're designing for is the it's like we have the luxury for like designing the highways before you design the autonomous car. I mean, like it's like in this infrastructure, it's all marble, conveyor systems. It's all like we the beauty of what Marble does is we own the integration layer too. We build the core technology, but we also own the integration aspect of it. So that gives us complete control of the environment, controlling product flow in terms of controlling the environment. Like, we try to set ourselves up for current, state. So the automation that, or the robotics that we're putting onto our level one autonomy now of what we're deploying is, you'll see robotics in the form of like automated saws. We're putting them on like on probably the larger, like early on in the process, that's kind of performing the major cuts, the stuff that actually decides a ton of that yield, the stuff that is even hard for humans still to cut it into. You're dealing with, while it's still like 200-300 pounds, you're making those major cuts that really decide how the process downstream gets affected. Like I meant, so it's in the form of like automated saws, it's in the form of like automated water jet robotics. So, like, like the cutting tools, as far as like the end effectors and the tools you're using to cut, like that is, all these technologies exist. WaterJet is out there, automated saws. It's just we're putting a layer of like autonomy on it, and layer of perception and imaging that hasn't been available before. And that's really what we're enabling here. It's given it a little bit more dexterity. It's given it that ability to work with the variability of, like, you get one big side of beef, the next one is 300 pounds smaller. Like, you're able to adjust for that variability in real time. But again, we're laying out the ground for kind of downstream in this process, when the really dexterous stuff, the kind of like deboning. How do you get a bone out of something? That basically is going to require probably more sophisticated, motion planning algorithms than what we have today. And it's going to require, us as a company getting a lot better at the dexterity of these robots, and the manipulation of these robots, and the hardware. It's not, it's sometimes, we find ourselves having to build a lot of this, the gantries that move these cutting tools ourselves. And again, you always want to find that balance. It's not, you don't want to just throw a six-axis robot at everything. Uh, you know, um, you want to try and the motto here is like keep it as simple as you can, because again it's gotta work, it's got to be redundant, it's got to be easy to wash. These are very very tough environment. It's today we're everything we do on the pack off side is it's you're working with a packaged product. Every now and then we get products that are not properly sealed and all that stuff. But now you're moving upstream, and it's direct food contact, and just the cleaning gets elevated. All that stuff gets really really tough. So you want to keep it as simple as possible. So it's always where's that balance. Plus, you just have to work again. We go back to like the throughputs. Like everybody's measured by throughput. So the meat facilities are measured by like they call it the chain speed. Like we have we process you know 250 head per hour. So like could I build a robot here that shows you some of the deboning tasks here? Yeah, but can I do it as fast as a human, as good as a human? Can I get all the red meat off of that bone? That's and consistently. That's what that's what you really need to get at now, and less of like, look, I can do this in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Do you see eventually like the speed, like speeding up the process? Like you've talked about yield efficiencies. Do you see speed efficiencies?
Speed is they're pretty fast now. I, I don't think anybody. I mean, I think everyone would love to go faster. I don't know that they should or they can.
Mm,
There's some regulations too around like you cannot go beyond this speed.
mm,
I think if you, and that's kind of where a lot of our yield value proposition is more of like, instead of going faster, let's just clean the bones better. Let's get you more pounds, and let's look at how should we optimize this animal to maximize whatever you're trying to maximize. Your orders, maximize profit. It's if what they do is the cattle is a variable. Seasons, regions, all those things. The output is also it's a commodity. So prices of these different muscles are at any given point what your customers want. And like I think there's an optimization there. You get more by optimizing the process, for like how do I get more out of my existing speed than like let's just go faster. Historically it's been let's go faster so we can make more money. And I think you're starting to kind of get to the edge of like how fast you can go.
mm, Interesting. Um, this uh, this goes a little bit far out when you think about kind of the future of ag technology, ag robotics. I was at a conference where they were kind of talking about how far away are we from, like on the farming side, from a farmer who's not farming anymore. There's a lot of AI systems that are doing the farming, kind of working together. When you think about the future of your industry, like is at some point a lights out only robotics facility, does that make sense? Or kind of what do you see as like where the industry, if it's not that, or like, or even maybe that's really far away, like where are you seeing the industry going in terms of
Mhm.
more when more of these robotic systems being implemented? Where are you kind of seeing the trends of what it looks like?
Yeah. Um, so no, I mean, as far as lights out, again, like this is food. So you need a good thing. You always should have a human in the loop or what, thinking about, or at least that's how you're framing it. I think I think where technology is now, where technology will go in the next 5 to 10 years, I think it is probably 70-80% labor efficiency. You're talking a significant impact in terms of labor efficiency. The form factor is not humanoids or some crazy. I don't think it's a good idea to hand a humanoid a knife. Plus, it's just not a good fit for what we're trying to do. We're firm believers in you know you build a highly specialized machine, um, and it does one job and it does it very very good. You control the environment for it to give it best odds of succeeding because again, you're trying to kind of reproduce the happy path as many times as possible and not have things, get out of your control. Again, the illusion today that like, we can take, the videos I was showing you earlier with a bunch of people, in the cutting process, the idea that like, if Shafiq doesn't show up to work, that day we just, we send the human robot or the humanoid to do his job is just not, that's not what it is. And that's really what that's, so our philosophy on the form factor is like, again, like you control 100% of the environment and that will give the automation a very good chance of succeeding. So I think that's the education that I think we're taking our customers kind of towards. We're educating them on that, and they and I think even from an investor lens, I think I think there's a bit of a backlash you're seeing now on some of the humanoid stuff. Um, you know, uh, the idea of like a general purpose thing is appealing, but I think you have for a specific problem, for a specific context. And that's what's going to, I think the industry is realizing that. And that's why they're showing openness to, they never get somebody who comes through their doors and says like, I've got a better idea to do this whole thing. And that's what Marvel's doing. And they're showing openness to it because I think there's that recognition that like the technology is here. It's more of like, what's the right approach? Like, how do you walk before you run with this stuff? What is the right form factor? I think whoever can show them that journey towards automation, they're willing to believe, they're willing to try it, they're willing to do a lot of it, they're willing to really embrace it and go put up a new building for you to implement this technology because they understand this is you know some aspects of what they do is not sustainable and there's room for technology to help.
Yeah, great. I've got one more topic area that I'd like to hit, but I'll just pause. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop in the chat, or if you want to speak, feel free to unmute yourself. I'll just pause if anybody else has any questions. Okay, if not, the last topic area, and this is one that I'm going to try to hit on all these webinars, since you're in the ag industry and you're every day you get to think about robotics. Um, I'm just curious about other opportunities you see in ag specifically for robotics. And so the first question being like, if you were going to start a new ag robotics that it can't compete with Marble, where would you start? Like, what would you do in terms of being looking for opportunities in ag?
Yeah, so I think every now and then we get approached about like, are you doing anything on the production, animal production? I mean, side of things. I think there are applications there. Potentially, like computer vision could be quite the enabler for some robotic applications there. Um, I'm thinking animal protein before I get kind of to the broader, you know, um, even downstream from what we do, usually like, that's an area we're starting to focus on. Okay, so like, when the product leaves, the facilities that where they're called primary processing, kind of downstream, like what could you do with food service? What could you that product down and enable some more automation to those secondary processing facilities in terms of like food safety, um, like inspection type of stuff, sampling, applications, or in terms of like, how do you, just up and down the supply chain, both crops and livestock, are just, kind of, resource use, whether it's, water, plastic, cardboard, like all that stuff. Do robotics have an application here? Whether you're spraying chemicals or water or anything like that, how do you use robotics to do less of that stuff? Um, so there's all kinds of applications, on the field, on the crop side, there's a lot of people working on kind of picking technology, harvesting technology, all that stuff. The one thing I will say about it's a general statement about probably, ag robotics, probably any type of robotics, and I alluded to this earlier. I think the value proposition, the payback has to be multifaceted. The the labor alone, and I think this is a bit of an illusion. I don't know if it's an illusion. It's a labor is what opens the door for a conversation. Okay. I think you have to look, your technology has to, has to offer the value proposition has to go beyond just labor efficiencies. You have to look closely at yield. You have to look at, if it's got a food safety aspect to it, if it's, it has to be a multifaceted payback because one to one, it is a hard value prop. This technology is not cheap. Again, this technology is finicky. Humans are very good at what they do. You have to give above and beyond. And again, that's where the conversation gets very interesting is how does this technology, to your earlier question, Brendan, how does this technology help me make money, then save money, or both?
Yeah, yeah, that's really
Yeah.
helpful. We had one question or a couple questions come in from Steve Tippery. You can see him in chat. So he asked, how do you see your company being AI proof as capabilities continue to advance? And then he had some questions about your business model.
Yeah, great question, Steve. So it is
Just a second, Shafiq, I think you cut out.
so much data. Data is the moat. I mean, we say that. Oops.
There, you're back. Go ahead and
Can
restart.
you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Very good. I was saying, like a lot of people say, we've got so much data, nobody else has that data. I mean, we can make the same claim. I don't think data is necessarily like your only moat, and we collect out there. But I think, Steve, my philosophy on this is like I think when this is all said and done, I think still like the jury's still out on like who's gonna make the most money. Is it the people who are building like the core technology? Or is it the integrators? Is it people that are doing the service? Like who's going to get rich off of this stuff, right? And like we do what we do because we have to. Like we build the core technology. I do the integration piece. I do the servicing, and I know you do that too. And I own that whole stack because I have to. But I think ultimately that's what becomes the moat. I own the entire stack, and I don't think customers would buy it from me today if it wasn't for the whole stack and including the servicing piece of it. But it's also what enables our technology to work is by us really kind of controlling that environment, owning the stack is I think that is your ultimate moat.
Mhm.
Is if that's what your question is.
Sure. There's
You
not a right
know,
answer here. I just thought I'd
if
ask.
it. Yeah. Um, Yeah, business model facts. They pay for the equipment and then they pay us software licensing for us. With this next thing, we're kind of elevating the offering. Now we're selling the service of fabrication. We're selling the service of packaging. So today, what they're doing is the equipment is ours. We deploy it, and then it becomes processing as a service model. They pay for throughput. So for every head of cattle they send through our technology, they're paying a fee, and that becomes very very appealing for us. It becomes very appealing for them because we've been able to identify quite a bit of value creation with this new platform that it's leaving plenty of money for us and our customers to capture off of this. But now we're selling this stuff as a service, not selling the equipment.
Okay. And maybe last part of that question, how do you calculate ROI? Just curious. We're doing a lot of work on that right now. I just thought it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. So kind of the payback for us, the two big buckets that are measurable is labor efficiency and then yield. It's in our case it's easy. Like every animal has two sides. Like you send one side through our system, you send the other side, do it the conventional way, I guess, and you kind of measure yield that way. So you're able just to measure pure pounds. But then the labor, if you sent one down one, the new process, the old process, the one process, the new process did it with half the labor. So their CFOs are able to kind of do that math pretty quick. I can tell you like, probably, 40% is labor, 60% is yield.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for your question, Steve. With that, we're coming up on the hour, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Chafik, any final thoughts that you wanted to say, just generally as we start this focus on ag robotics, is within your journey of building within this?
No, what I'll say is I think there's a lot of good big problems to be solved in ag and food. I think I think we're just at the start of what this technology can do. I think it's a really fun space to be in. For those of you that are in Nebraska, I think this is such a team sport. I'm glad Steve's here, and I think I think we just the people who do this stuff for a living need to stick together. And I think for resources, for knowledge sharing, for all that stuff, because it's even when you've got all the problems solved, it's sharing, who you use for vendors, connections, all that stuff is such a big deal. I think that'd be my biggest, I guess, note slash request for those of you who are in this space, and like, if Marble can be of any help, if you're thinking about starting a company, if you have a company, like if me, my engineers, if we can be of any help, our resources, like please reach out.
One thing, I'll just throw this out. I've been in quite a few places the last month, and one of the things that I've taken away is some areas have a regular AgTech get together, and we used to have something like that in Nebraska, and maybe we still do it. I'm just out of the loop, but that might be good to resurrect sometime.
Yeah, we could work on that
Absolutely.
for sure.
No.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Shafiq. Thanks for giving the time for this presentation. I learned a lot, so thank you for taking the time to do that. Thanks everybody for attending. We're going to try to make this a monthly series with local founders, but also founders from around the nation who are focused in working in ag technology, ag robotics specifically. Next month, we're still getting scheduled, but I'm in talks right now with Greenfield Robotics as being our host for that one, or being our presenter for that one. So be on the lookout, be on the Combine webinar or newsletter, and we'll send out that information. So we also have a couple other webinars coming up focused on late stage investment for ag, and one focused on producers for specifically how to get involved in investing in startups with Ag Venture Alliance. So thanks everybody. Thanks, Shafiq.
Thanks, guys.